Man, thank you, Jay. Appreciate it. Welcome. So glad you guys are here this morning. I want to take just a moment to thank Bobby for filling in last week. Someone asked me about it, and I said, don't expect Bobby energy from me this morning, because that's, for number one, I don't drink Mountain Dew, and number two, I just, I'm old. I'm older than him. I'd be sick the next day probably. But anyway, the other thing I want you to know is this, and I listened to Bobby's message, and I need you to know something, that this message was written on July the 10th. I need you to know that there is no plagiarism, but there is some incredible crossover. And isn't it great the way the Holy Spirit works and merges these two things together? So you're going to hear some familiar things, and I need to know that. I need Ethan to know that I'm going to be calling him up here to try to catch me. Actually, I have faith in Ethan in everything but his ability to catch me. So, and I don't even know if I could jump that high, Ethan, so I'm good. And also, I didn't even read your text until I heard it from Bobby. And but again, a lot of this is going to cross over, and I'm excited about that for you to hear how the Holy Spirit already was working before Bobby even got up last week. So thank you for letting me do that. We had a great trip in Honduras. Looking forward to going back in January. Talk to John or myself if you want to go with us in January. But we are continuing in the life of Paul. We're in Acts chapter 18. So if you have your Bible, turn to Acts chapter 18. You know me, I go through lots of verses every week. We're going to do 4 today. So 4 today, we're going to cover the first 4 verses of Acts chapter 18. But before we get started, let me ask you this question. Whose job is it to do ministry? Think about it. Whose job is it to do ministry? Is it the pastor? Is it the paid staff? Or is it all of us? I have a friend that I went to middle school and high school with, and I mean, even though we've been friends for a long time, he actually hates the idea that pastors get paid. So we're still friends, but he hates that. He's like, I just think that's wrong. And he has this joke. I know you've heard it before. He looks at me, he says, you only work 1 day a week anyway, right? So surely, why are you getting paid? He hates it, right? And so in his mind, I mean, he still thinks we should do the work. He just doesn't think we should get paid to do it. So I don't know how that works for him. But anyway, so you have that side, but then you have this other side, the opposite side that says, you know what, we need a new ministry. We need home groups ministry. So let's go hire a home groups pastor. Or we need this ministry in the church, so let's go hire somebody else. And every ministry that gets done in the church, we think we got to hire somebody to do it. So again, whose responsibility is it to do the ministry? When we last left Paul in Acts chapter 17, he was in the city of Athens in Greece, in southern Greece. And he was there. He had just given his speech, his sermon on Areopagus, and it's a hill there. The Areopagus was a hill, but it was also a courtroom kind of. It was an outside a civic building. There was magistrates that were known as the Areopagus, and he gave us this window into what he preached to people, not just from a corporate setting like this, but also what I believe what Paul would talk to people one-on-one. And we talked about this. We talked about effective engagement, how you meet people where they are, and then you somehow reveal to them who God is, and then you call them to life change. And that was his effective engagement that we talked about a couple weeks ago, and he had a mixed response to that. He had some people who rejected him just outright. Why? Because they were philosophers and very intellectual people, and he was debating with them, and they didn't believe in the resurrection. So as soon as he mentioned that Jesus had raised from the dead, it was over. Didn't want any part of it. He had some people that responded to the message, put their faith in Jesus, believed. Even one of the members of the Areopagus, even some influential women there. It was incredible the response he had, that a few people put their faith in Jesus. And then the majority of the people, they said, we just want to hear more. When you come back, we want to hear more, which is sometimes all you can ask for, right? When you're sharing your faith, when you're trying to make disciples, sometimes you just hope that some people will say, hey, I'd just like to hear more. That's the response he got. That's where we left him. And then he left Athens in our text today, and he went to Corinth. And so this first question I want to answer, as we're answering that bigger question, whose job is to do ministry, is why did Paul leave Athens and go to Corinth? So we're going to start reading one verse. Here we go. Acts 18, verse 1. After this, he left Athens and went to Corinth. There's some theology for you, right? All right, after this, he left Athens and went to Corinth. We have a map here, and we've been tracking. So we went through the first missionary journey of Paul, and now we're on the second missionary journey. The first missionary journey, over there on the right, he crossed through this, what is known as Asia Minor. It's Turkey today, and the towns of Antioch, Pisidia, Iconium, Lystra, Derbe, the Galatian towns. We went through all of that. Now he's traveling. He went through his hometown, and he's traveling on. He went to Troas, Philippi, Thessalonica, Berea. He went to Athens, and now he's down all the way. He's going to Corinth. And so he comes to this place called Corinth, and he spends about 18 months. He hadn't been in Athens very long. And so I'm asking the question, why did Paul choose to go to Corinth? Well, I'm going to give you some reasons why, I think. And I think it's important for our context today. The first reason I think that Paul went to Corinth is because he was leaving Athens, because I think that Athens wasn't the fertile soil that Paul was wanting. What was he doing in Athens? He was doing a lot of debating with philosophers, right? That wasn't Paul's thing. He didn't want to go teach at Bible college. That wasn't his thing. He wanted to make communities. He wanted to establish faith communities. That was what he wanted to do. He wanted to establish faith communities. Next week, we're going to talk about this as we go to the verses 5 and following. We're going to talk about the difference between building a church and establishing faith communities, because I believe there's a big difference, and I believe one of those is what God wants us to do. And so he's establishing these faith communities, and I think he left because he really didn't want to just spend time debating. And even though a few people came to faith, I think he had another reason or another place that he needed to go. So what was Corinth? Here's the second reason. The second reason is because he went to Corinth because Corinth was a very significant place. What was Corinth? Corinth was about 40 miles west of Athens. It was established as a city or as a town in the 7th century BC. And by the 5th century BC, so we're 500 years before Jesus even shows up on the scene, it grew to be 10,000 people. Now, to you and me, that's not very big. That was very big back then. It was a very significant town. It was known for its architecture and its buildings. That's why I think in 1 Corinthians 3, Paul uses the analogy of building and a foundation when he's talking about our faith in Jesus, right? Because he's going to what they knew, and there was all kinds. It was known for its architecture, but it was captured by Rome in 146 BC. During a war, and then it was colonized by Julius Caesar in 44 BC. And so it became this colony, this Roman colony, and to colonize it, Rome sent some people, sent freed slaves and poor people. What a great way to start a town, right? Sounds like Australia. No, just kidding. That's not really a good joke. If you're from Australia, I apologize right now. But anyway, it sent free slaves and poor people from Egypt and Syria, and Jews were sent as well. This is the kind of people Paul might have encountered, but the town continued to grow and become very, very influential. Okay? So I think Paul went there because it was a strategic location, it was thriving economy, and it had a cosmopolitan culture. We're going to talk about all of this. Well, I had to look up cosmopolitan culture, what that meant. It basically meant it was very diverse, and it meant it was very attractive globally. So people were coming to Corinth to establish this place because of its global interconnectedness. It really grew. Now, here's another reason it was why all that happened, the trade and commerce. I have another map of the Isthmus of Corinth. What is the Isthmus of Corinth? You see the little piece of landmass from the Attica Peninsula, and then you have this, I can't say it, Peloponnese. That's how I'm going to say it. All right. So this little 4-mile land bridge was the connection between Greece, where he just was, and this other part of Greece, this southern part, right? And it's 4 miles across. Right now you see the canal, right? The canal wasn't there at that time. And so you had two seas. You had the Adriatic Sea and the Aegean Sea. And this was a place where ships would come. You go, how did they get through? See, their choice was either to come through here and try to get across this 4 miles, or to go around 435 miles on the southern part of Greece, so that they could get around the other side. The problem was that took time, it took more money, and it was very, very dangerous. And so Corinth got really smart, and what they did was they created this land bridge. They created a limestone pathway. And you're like, okay, you're still not telling me how the ships got there. Listen how they did it. The ship would come to one of the two seaports 4 miles apart. They would unload the ship of all of its cargo. They would somehow hoist this ship up onto a wooden cart. They would drag that cart 4 miles across this limestone pathway. They would get to the other side. They'd put the boat back in the water, fill it back up with this cargo. They're on their way. By the way, they charged a fee for that. Of course, why wouldn't you? And so this became an incredible place of commerce and trade, and people were coming from everywhere. So I believe that Paul went to this place for that reason. It created lots of opportunities to engage people with the gospel. There was lots of Jews and Gentile people there. It was also, now I will say this, you saw on there's a canal. I have another picture here of the canal. In 1893, they built this canal, and they made it too narrow. So that's the canal now. And so small cruise ships, think the poop cruise, think that one. Some of you don't even get that. I'm sorry, I said poop in a sermon. But they only the small ones could go through this canal. And so it can go through it today. So it's really useless. They didn't do themselves any favor for this. You can't take the big shipping containers through there. But it was a very significant place. A place where the gospel could be shared. Morally, it was a place that needed Jesus. Corinth was known for its terrible morals, for its vice and its immorality. Go read 1 Corinthians and see the things that Paul had to write to the people, the community of faith, and the things that they were doing that they didn't understand were wrong. Reminds me of when we go to Honduras and some of the way that some of the men there think about women and some of the questions we get asked about, how to, anyway, I won't tell you those questions, but I mean, the moral decadence that is there. In fact, the phrase to Corinthianize actually came to be known to describing a life of decadence and depravity. So Paul went there because it was significant and because it was a great opportunity because these people needed Jesus. But I want to tell you the most obvious reason, I think the main reason Paul went to Corinth. And this is the most statement I'm going to make today. Paul went there because God told him to. Now, I could have preached this at any point along Paul's journeys, right? You remember, we talked about this a few months ago, when Paul was going across Asia Minor and he was on this journey, and he said, I wanted to go south, but I couldn't go that way. And then I wanted to go north up into Bithynia, but the Spirit stopped me from going where I wanted to go. And so he had two choices. He could go back east and go back home, or he could continue going west to where God was telling him to go. And so he followed what God was telling him to do. And so my question is this: are you willing to go wherever God tells you to go? To the people that God sends you to? You see, God will, I've said this a bunch of times, I'm going to say it again. God will send you to people that He will never send me to. God will send you to the places that won't let me come in, but they'll let you come in. And if all the work is to be done by the guy that's standing up here, or whoever the paid staff is, hear me, there are people who will die and go to hell because you were the one that God sent to them. There are places that will never hear about Jesus because people say, well, that's not my job, that's not my calling. And yet God is sending you to places and to people that need to know Jesus. And are you okay with the fact that if you don't go, they're not okay? See, Paul was willing to go wherever God told him to go. Because that's how he knew where his mission was to go to next. You remember we talked about this when we talked about making disciples. When Jesus said, go and make disciples, that word go is not go. It's not an imperative statement. Make disciples is the imperative statement. That word is a participle that is modifying that. I know, English. But it's this: make disciples as you go. Make disciples where God is sending you. Make disciples whoever God puts in front of you. And so are you recognizing where God is sending you and who he's sending you to? Let's go on, verse 2. Paul went from Athens to Corinth, where he found a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had ordered all the Jews to leave Rome. We'll get to that in a second. Paul came to them, and since they were of the same occupation, tent makers by trade, he stayed with them and worked. And he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath and tried to persuade both Jews and Greeks. Now, Aquila and Priscilla were from Pontus. It's in northern Asia Minor. I have another map here that'll show you. It's not a great map, but it kind of shows you. So this is the area, we remember Galatia, where he came across the first journey. This is where he came across, and he tried to go south, and then he tried to go north to Bithynia. So Aquila and Priscilla were Jews from that region on the right that circled Pontus, just on the coast of the Black Sea. And so this couple, who were tent makers, were Jews. They moved, just imagine in your mind, they moved west to Italy, into Rome, and they lived there for a while until in 49 AD, where Claudius said all the Jews need to get out. And so all the Jews got out, and then they ended up in Corinth. I have a question for you. Is it a coincidence that tent makers ended up in the same place that Paul showed up? No. That's just coincidence, right? No, that's how God works. I think it's funny, too, that Bithynia was right there, and Paul wanted to go there, and I don't know if they were there at the same time. Were they close? I don't know. All I know is that when Paul showed up in Corinth, this couple was there who happened to have the same occupation as them, and so he decided, I need a place to live, I need some work to do, and so he lived with them and began to work. Some people believe they were already followers of Christ, and I believe he called them together. And so Paul continued to work, and he continued to do the mission that God had called him to. We would call that, you've heard this term, I think, bivocational ministry. Bivocational ministry. It usually looks like this. There's a small church that hires a pastor that can't afford to give him a full-time salary. And by the way, if you've ever worked part-time ministry, there's no such thing. Part-time ministry is just part-time pay. Just so you know. So go hug on your part-time workers here, just so you know. Because they're doing full-time work. They're just getting paid part-time. And so bivocational says, I'm a pastor, and I'm at this church, I'm doing ministry. And so why did Paul make tents? Simple answer. He needed to eat. He needed a place to live. So he went and got a job for physical survival. But you notice he continued doing the work of ministry. So we see bivocational as a pastor who happens to have another job. What if we saw it the other way? What if we saw it the other way, that people that have jobs also do ministry? What if we saw it where people who go out and do work to make a living, to pay the bills, also are engaged in the mission that God has called them to in ministry, making disciples as they go? Listen to me. As a believer, and I'm assuming a lot of you in this room are believers, as a believer, what you get paid to do, you do for physical survival. End stop. End of sentence, period. What you do and get paid to do is what you do so you can eat and so you have a roof over your head and you can take care of your family. Hear me. It is not your purpose and it is not your mission. As a believer, what you do is for physical survival. It is not your identity. So, if we see it the other way, what if each of us understood that God has called all of us, not just the pastor, to live on mission wherever and to whoever God sends us? And we saw ourselves. See, I don't think Paul saw himself as a pastor who happened to be a tent maker. I think Paul saw himself as a tent maker who was so committed and passionate about the mission that God had him on that he was going to do this over here so he could live, so that he could go over here and do this. What if all of us saw it that way? What if each of us saw what we do as the thing that lets us live so that we can continue to live on mission, and we were more passionate about that than we were about this? Now, does this matter? Yes. Here's why. It's not just how you have physical survival. What you do for a living may be exactly where God sent you to people that need to hear the gospel message. Remember those people that He's not sending me to? You need to have a job, not just for that, but so that you can go in the world and see that as your mission field. I've said this before, and Bobby, I heard you say last week, so I want to make sure you hear me say this. This is not an excuse, all right? It's startling when you said that COVID was half a decade ago. That blew my mind, right? This is not an excuse. But what happened during COVID? What happened during COVID was everything shut down. We shut down our businesses. We shut down our churches. We shut down our schools. And where did everybody go? We went home. That's what we were told. You need to stay at home. Shelter in place. Oh, I get PTSD saying the word, right? Shelter in place. And I missed an opportunity. I'm going to speak for myself. You decide if you miss an opportunity. Where were your neighbors? They were at home. And for the first time in my lifetime, everybody around me was home at the same time. And they told me, you can go outside. Thank you, government. You can go outside. So I'm going to go outside. Did I talk to my neighbors? Yeah. Did I talk to them about Jesus? Nope. Maybe every once in a while. Did I go and say, hey, you know what? Let's meet in our lawn chairs outside and let's start talking about who Jesus is. We missed an opportunity. We missed an opportunity that was right there in front of us. Because what were we doing that whole time? We were desperately trying to figure out how to get back into this building. Like somehow we couldn't have church if we weren't here. God was talking to Moses on Mount Sinai when He gave him the 10 Commandments and all the other law. And in chapter 19, verses 5 and 6, He says this to Moses and to his people. He said, now, if you will carefully listen to me and keep my covenant, you will be my own possession out of all the peoples, although the whole earth is mine. And you will be my, here it is, kingdom of priests and my holy nation. What's a priest? A priest was someone who was a connection between God and the people. He was the conduit between God and the people. And he came from a certain family. And so this would have been startling for them to hear. In fact, they heard this even before they were given the laws about the priest. And yet he said, I want you to be my kingdom of priests. What's that mean? It means that He wants us to be the conduit between God and the people in our lives. He wants us to be the connection point between other people and between God and the people in our lives. First Peter says it even more. Peter says, as you come to Him, a living stone, rejected by people, but chosen and honored by God, you yourselves as living stones, a spiritual house, are being built to be a holy priesthood to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ, a conduit. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for His possession, so that you may proclaim the praises of the one who called you out of darkness into His marvelous light. God has called each of us to do ministry, to be bivocational. We all are called to both. Work in the marketplace, work on the mission field. Erwin McManus is a pastor in California. If you've been around me long enough, you've heard this quote more than once, okay? But I love it. I heard him speaking this to people in the marketplace, and he said this. He said, we were created for work in the marketplace. Actually, what God did in the garden is He gave us responsibility. He told us to take stewardship over the planet, to have authority over His creation. Work isn't the result of the fall. Work being experienced without meaning and fulfillment is the result of the fall. And there is this deeper sub-narrative that is a problem. This strange, unspoken kind of statement that if you actually have a job, you're not living out the mission of Jesus. Really, the people that we admire, that we canonize, the people that we elevate as the missionaries and the heroes of the faith are the people that other people with jobs sponsor by giving of their hard-earned money so that they can do something that the people working these other jobs don't have time to do or inclination to do. So we end up creating not a missionary but a mercenary mentality where we pay people to do what we refuse to do. You see, somehow we have taken the secular and the sacred and we've divided them. We've separated them. And when I take my secular life, what I do in the marketplace, and I separate it from the sacred, what I'm doing on mission for God, I will be spending my time building my kingdom or building some other kingdom instead of working diligently to move God's kingdom forward. We cannot separate the sacred from the secular. So, what if we saw it differently? What if we looked at church differently? What if we saw church not as this time and day that we come and gather together, but what if we see church as what you're going to do tomorrow when you go out, hang out with your friends, or when you go to work, or when you're at home with your family? What if we see church as us being who we're supposed to be on the field, in the places and with the people that God has sent us to, instead of seeing it as this gathering that we're doing right now? So back in February when we went through the Engage series, I shared this with you, and I want to share it with you again because I think we need to hear it. I want to define a different kind of church. So again, I didn't know what Bobby did, but pull out your phones or your notepad because you got some homework. Because I want to take what he said about community groups, I want to take it maybe one step further. What he said was perfect, was great. It was right. But I'm going to add another layer to it. So here's if we're going to be a different kind of church, the first thing we need to do is I need you to identify your community. I need you to identify your community. Who are those people that you hang out with? Who are those people that you're around all the time? And if it's just church people, we need to expand our community, all right? But who are those people? Who are you with? I hear people all the time saying, I don't have time for small group. I don't have time for ministry. I don't have time to do this or to share my faith or to have, quiet time. I don't have time for this. So what I'm telling you is I want you to find the places you're already at. Where do you go to work? Where do you go to school? Who are you hanging out with? That's your community. Now, the second part I want you to do is this. I want you to invite some partners to come with you. Now, who are those partners? Those partners probably are people in your community. I love the stories last week about how these young people are learning how to lead small groups, right? So you find the people at your school that are believers. You find the people at work. You invite partners to come with you in turning your secular community into a sacred space. So you're going to need some believers, but you're also going to need to find those people that are far from God, because if we're going to be making disciples for people who are far from God, who need the hope of God, we can't just rally around the people that are just believers. We got to use that as get to the third place, which is you initiate intentional opportunity and engagement. You find ways to intentionally initiate opportunity and engagement with people. In this identified community, how can you and your partners, those people, those believers you've called to be a part with you, how can you go? Because two are better than one, right? Cord of three strands is not quickly broken. That's not just for weddings. We all come together, and you and believers go into that secular space, and you bring the sacred there, and you initiate intentional opportunities, intentional engagement, sharing the gospel message with people that you encounter. As the band comes back up, let me wrap this up. I read this, and so I don't want to take credit for it, but there are three things that need to intersect for people to come to faith in Jesus. If you're going to make your community, your secular community, turn it into the sacred, if you're going to go out, because it matters what we do in here, but it matters much more out there, but there are some things that have to happen for people to come to faith. Okay? The first thing that has to happen, they have to intersect. The first thing is a friendship with someone who truly acts like Jesus. For people to come to faith in Jesus, they need a relationship, a friendship with someone who really looks like Jesus. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I don't. Sometimes I don't. So I need to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to look like, to sound like, to speak like Jesus, because people need to have that encounter. But you know what else they need? They need a relationship with a tribe of 4 or 5 other Christians. Just remember what I said. You find your partners that you're doing community with. They need 4 or 5 other Christians. You know why? Because they might look at you and think you're a one-off. They might look at you and go, well, you're different than other Christians, but all the other Christians I encounter, they're terrible. So they need to see more. They need to see 4 or 5 believers that look like Jesus. And so you need to get with those partners that you're building community with and say, we need to make sure that we're praying to look like Jesus every day so that we can make an impact on these people. And then the third thing that a person needs that has to intersect with their life to make them come to faith in Jesus is they need a come-as-you-are environment, learning environment. So they can come with whatever warts they have, whatever sin they're struggling with. And they can learn the ways of Jesus in an environment with patience. Because I see heads shaking. You got friends that are like, I don't want anything to do with Jesus. And they're going to come to faith in Jesus through you before they ever step foot in a church and hear a pastor. And this is a hard question for me to ask. But are you okay? Are you okay if they don't come to faith in Jesus because you refuse to go? Because you may be the only one they ever see. And you're going to be patient with them because you love them. It takes an average of 6 to 18 months for someone to begin to open up their heart to come to faith in Jesus. In India, it takes somewhere around 9 years for someone to come to faith from Hinduism to Christianity. So there's going to have to be this come-as-you-are patient environment for these people to sit in. Do we need large church worship gatherings? Probably. But hear me. Hear me. You got to hear this. Why are we here? Ephesians 4, again. Bobby brought this up. Ephesians 4 says that God gave some to be pastors and teachers. Why? To equip God's people for works of service. So we're here to equip you to go out there and do exactly what we're talking about. So do we need this? Yes, we do for that reason. Do we need programs and events? Buckle up. That's to be determined. Most of you are very thankful that we have children's ministry right now, okay? So I get it. We need programs and events, right? But hear me. I want to say this. I got to read it because I want you to hear it. A program or an event that exists only to appease or maintain or entertain followers of Jesus is not necessary. Let me say it again. Because I've been doing this a long time, guys. Probably one of my biggest frustrations is this. A program or an event that exists only to appease or maintain or entertain followers of Jesus is not necessary. Because just like last week, do we have the sign out front? But we don't have the product inside? Are we saying we're something that we're not? Our mission is to make disciples for the glory of God. And if all we're doing is rallying together to have a bunch of believers be appeased or entertained, I'm not going to say shut it down, but we got to make some changes. And what impact will this have on our world? The story is yet to be written. Hear me. And you and me, we're the authors. We get to write the story that will impact your school. That will impact your work. That will change your family tree. We get to write that story. And the challenge today is, will you step up and say, yes, I will be bivocational. I'll be someone that has a job. But I'll be committed to the mission that God has in the places and the people where he sent me. J.R. Vassar, a pastor in Texas, says it this way, and it's so good, and I just want to end with this. He's talking to pastors. He says this: whatever God is going to do, he's going to do it through all the people. And we must equip people to fulfill the mission in their greatest missional context, their workplace and their community. And when people's lives fall apart, and they will search for someone with the scent of the sacred on them and the leaven of the demonstration of the gospel opens the way for the light of the declaration of the gospel. Will you go to the places and the people that God has sent you? Let's stand. Let's worship him.